In part 1 of Coach Troy Pettit's interview, we talked about his coaching experience at Wagoner Lincoln High School, Manual Training High School, and also his teaching experience at Schuyler Junior High School. For part 2 of the interview, we dug a little bit deeper into his experience and also his perspective on mandatory integration within the state of Oklahoma. Let's get right to it.
It almost seems like integration in Oklahoma kind of stole some opportunities from Black students because they were doing so well at schools such as Manual. Do you have any thoughts about that? Or?
I do, and in some areas, some things I'm going to say may be a little controversial, but I'm going to say it because that's how I really feel. I was asked to, a year before mandatory integration, the superintendent of the school called me into his office in Troy, said, next year is our last year. We're going to have to do mandatory integration. I have selected 7 teachers from Muskogee Public, 7 Black teachers, to go into the white schools and teach 1 year before mandatory integration. You're one of the 7 and you don't have an alternative. That's kind of the way he said it, you know. So I had to stop teaching at Sadler and I went to Muskogee High School. It was called, was it Muskogee High School? It might have been Muskogee Central High School then, but it's now Muskogee High School. But that's when they built the new school. They had this new, it was very, very nice. It's a very nice building facility and stuff. And I had apprehensions about that. Schuyler, I did. I had a lot of apprehensions about going over. I had never been around white kids, you know, white faculty and stuff in my whole life. I had grown up in a segregated school, went to segregated high school and college and taught. So I didn't know. But I just said I've always had a lot of confidence in my abilities. So as a teacher and as a coach, so I'm gonna give it my best shot. I'm gonna just see what's gonna happen, and I did, and I'm glad I did. That was a growing experience for me as well, because when you go into a school where you are the only Black teacher that you can see, there was another Black teacher there, Doretha Richardson. Another Black teacher was already there. She had been teaching there 1 year before I got there. But I never saw her the whole time I was there. I never saw her because the school was that big. And I left every day. When I got through with my 4 classes, I went back to Muskogee Manual. I was still a basketball coach. So I went back to the high school, Manual Training High School. But when I saw what the new school had to offer and the facilities and the microscopes and books and visual and equipment and stuff that was available to them, to the exclusion of our kids having those kinds of things, I really wanted our kids to be a part of that. Like I said, now but I knew in my heart that they wouldn't be accepted wholly. I knew that because I had seen racism, lived through racism. And just because you integrate to school, racism is not going to go away. And I knew they were going to have problems with that. But Mr. Adams went over the same time I went over. He went over. They had him to go over as principal of the school. So we kind of got indoctrinated the same. He was a teacher, principal, one of the principals, and I was one of the teachers there. So I very seldom saw him. That's how big the school. Very seldom saw him. I did that for a year, and to be honest about it, Schuyler, I enjoyed my time over there because I got to see the. I didn't see that many teachers, anything like that. I just saw the kids, and kids, if you're fair with them, regardless of color, if you're fair with them, they were not racist in that regard. They didn't. I had nobody ever said anything that made me feel like they wouldn't do anything because I was Black. Never had that the whole time I was there. Somebody else may have had it, but I didn't. But I saw the facility and all they had to offer. I wanted my kids to be a part of that as well. So it wasn't that bad, but I knew there's a price to pay for that. Because when you leave a school that's comfortable for Black kids, as Muskogee Manual Training High School was, and you go to a whole new environment away from that, where you don't necessarily feel welcome, and you might not be welcome. Probably wouldn't be in mass. You see what I'm saying? I was just one teacher, so I wasn't a threat. But you take the whole team, you take all those kids over. It had to be very stressful for these kids who were thrusting it. I would think. But in order for us to grow to the point where, I'm looking at this time, in order for us to get where we need to get, but to be fair, we've got to go through this process. But I admit, Schuyler, I was not that optimistic about it happening right away. I didn't think this would be a utopian situation, not by any means. I figured that'd be frustrations, a lot of frustrations along the way to get to the point where you could actually, where our African-American kids could actually feel the way they felt, the comfort of being in an all-Black environment. Yes.
Can you tell me about any racism that you've experienced in your life?
I grew up in it, and I've experienced overt and covert racism in Oklahoma. I don't, because I lived in Oklahoma all my life, I can only talk about authority of Oklahoma. But it is it's a state where if you are not confident and assertive and insist on your rights and prepared to be victimized by racism in Oklahoma. And when I say big, I don't mean physically hurt or anything like that, but economically deprived. And as a matter of fact, it's still going on the way right now. Even when you look at disparity and economic socioeconomic backgrounds in Tulsa, just Tulsa, you can see it. You can see earning power, unemployment, all of that. It's still, and then you couple that with with what's going on in the world today. It's brought to the forefront now with the George Floyd and some other situations brought to the forefront. To the forefront, just how racist not only Oklahoma is, but the states as a whole. And Black people have been victimized, have to deal with that. And if you're not prepared emotionally, mentally, economically to deal with that, then you can find yourself being very frustrated, and which accounts for a lot of the anger and frustration in our young people in our society right now.
How long did you stay at Central High School, and what was next?
I taught at Muskogee Central 1 year, I believe 1 year, and then the superintendent called me in again over the summer. So what does he want now? He said, Troy, he said, you did such a good job at the school there. Everybody speaks so highly of you, the kid. He said, I want you to be assistant principal at Sadler, Alice Robertson Junior High School. Well, he wanted me there because they were integrating all the schools. So that I was there for 2 or 3 months as vice principal. I hated the job. I loved the kids, but I didn't like what I was doing. We had a principal that wasn't real strong, so I ended up doing most of the work, most of the disciplinary work and stuff. And there was so many black and white issues and stuff. I just didn't like doing that. I just said I did it because I was okay. I was good at it. I was good at putting out fires. I put out a lot of fires and stuff. I was okay with that. But I knew I was going to do this, and I'm going to find another job. So at that time, I looked in the paper. I just finished my master's at going to Northeastern. I had finished my master's at Northeastern in education and emphasis on guidance and counseling. And the black kids at Northeastern State were demanding a black counselor because they didn't have anybody that they could communicate with. And I saw that in the paper. And I said, shoot, this might be a good time for me. And I always wanted to go back and do college, work at a college anyway. So I sent my application in. And I had a basketball player, kid that I coached, Earl Gracie. I don't know whether you know the Gracie family or not, from Muskogee Emmanuel. He was the president of the Association of Black Collegians at NSU, Earl Gracie. Earl was killed in a car wreck about 2 years after that. But he was the president of the Association of Black Collegians at Northeastern. And I told him what I was doing. He went and talked to the president on my behalf. And I had some other people that were talking to me. And when they called me in for an interview, and I went down for an interview, and I knew I was hired when I walked in the door. I knew I was hired. And that was in the middle of the year, so I came back and resigned from Muskogee, Alice Robertson, because I didn't like being a vice principal. And I figured if I could do that much work, I at least should be the principal. So, but I knew I didn't want to be a principal of a school, so that's why I took the job at Tyler Club. They offered me the job, and I took the job and resigned, and I started in January of that particular year, I guess in 1970 maybe.
So how was your transition to Northeastern?
Irony of the whole thing, when I started my first day on the job at Northeastern, the black students had taken over the student union building in protest. They were protesting some things that were going on at the school and stuff. And so I was hired to be an advisor for the African American students. and also as a I don't know how you put it, but as a liaison between the Black students and the faculty, because they were not communicating well with the African American students at all at that time. That's why the students to go to the student union building and protest. So when I got to the campus, they had police, highway patrolmen, everybody surrounded on the campus and stuff. The Black kids were all in the student union building. That's what you call getting started in the fire. Yeah. So I was office in the education building, had my office there. Very nice office, and had a good real good supervisor over there. He did not interfere with anything I did, and they pretty much gave me autonomy to do whatever I feel like I need to do to improve the relationship between the students and the school. And so a lot of meetings and with students and with. But by knowing Earl Gracie in that position, was his influence was really invaluable, because he knew me, and having coached him in high school basketball, he knew the kind of person I was, and he had no problem in telling the kids, the Black kids, that I was okay. You know what I mean? Black kids didn't trust anybody during that time. They didn't trust anybody, any adults, because they had been betrayed so much. They were just angry and demanding some things, because they were being denied so many things. They would start demanding things, and I understood where they were coming from. It was not easy, but I had been in that position before. When you work as a vice principal of a school, especially in the first year of mandatory integration, and you got so many Black kids coming into school and parents resisting, and African American parents in Muskogee didn't back down, and I liked that about them. They didn't back down, and they bring their kids. They expect their kids to be treated right, and I was always proud of that factor. But when you get to college, the parents aren't there. It's just kids, and so you got to communicate effectively with the kids. And I knew that in order for me to be a successful counselor at that school, I had to win the trust of the African American students. If I couldn't do that, I'm dead in the water, and I knew that. So I went there and I talked to them, and I listened to them. And you know, there were times when they didn't like what I was saying, you know, but you know, sometimes it'd go too far off, and I had to bring them back in, you know, and we'd sit down with the president and vice president and stuff like that. And after a while, we kind of got some order back, you know. But the one thing that I like about Northeastern, they realized my value, and they let me have autonomy to handle things and suggesting the best way I felt. And when I got to the point where I was frustrated, and I wanted to take the afternoon off, nobody said a word. I wanted to go fishing, I went fishing, but I wasn't gonna burn myself out over those kind of issues, you know. But then I'd come back the next day and we get them. It worked well, but the African American kids were only standing up for what was fair. They were being treated differently in several areas. They were asking for an equal thing that they should have been granted without having to do that with. And they couldn't get the attention until they took drastic steps, you know. So in a way, I'm sitting here. I'm kind of liking what they're doing, you know. They stand up for themselves, and I'm proud of that, you know. But I got to, at the same time, I've got a job to do, you know what I mean. And I know what I'm hired to do. I was hired to improve relationships between both sides, and we got to the place where we did okay. We did okay with that. And they started hiring more Black teachers and stuff like that. But it took a while. God, it took a while. Because when I went there, I was the only African American staff person at the school when I went there. Now Harold Aldridge was already there. He was a psychology teacher, and he was already there, but he was on sabbatical, getting his doctorate degree at OU. So I was there by myself the first semester when I was there. So I also taught half-time when I was there too. I taught psychology as well as being a counselor. I was a counselor /
Did you coach there as well?
No. I retired from coaching when I went to Robertson. decided to give coaching up. And that's another story, but I'll say this just briefly. I retired from coaching because I was getting too frustrated with the inequity of the way that African American teams were being treated in the state playoffs and stuff like that. You know, the things we had to deal with that I felt were unfair to our kids, and it was just getting frustrated with me. It was kind of getting me out of my character, and I decided I didn't want a job where I was going to be angry all the time, frustrated all the time. That, you know, they would schedule playoff games in terms of the big games where, you know, for the states, they would schedule them in a way where you had to go to a town where the majority of the fans would be on the side of the team that you're playing against, and that was unfair. You had a hard time getting a black official to call the game, and the officiating was one-sided in so many situations. Now they'd hear me. They'd probably say I'm griping, but I'm not griping. I know that I played against it, and I also coached against where the officiating was just downright dishonest. And that's why I have so much respect for Harold Aldridge Sr. at Taft. He won so many state championships with his kids. I have nothing but respect for him because I know it wasn't easy. It wasn't, and when you can win a state championship, you know, and you're in an all-black school, it's at that day and time, you were accomplishing something for sure. And Booker T. Washington winning all these up here in Tulsa, winning all the state championships, it's saying a lot.
When did you retire from NSU?
I was there 7 years, seven years, and let's see. I left Tahlequah. I loved my job. At that point, I was very established as a counselor and enjoyed what I was doing. And my son was about 11, and his mom and I agreed to let him stay with me. And so I was comfortable with him there. But it wasn't anything to do in Tahlequah. I was just kind of bored. So I just said, I'd like to go to a larger city and where I could at least, you know, have a better social life or something, you know. So I started looking at Tulsa because my parents lived there and I was up there a lot. And so one evening we were leaving, he and I were leaving Tulsa. And at that point, there's a street, 6th Street, I believe. If you take 6th Street out east from downtown, it'll run you right into TU's campus. And it's a horseshoe like. And I didn't know where I was going. I was just driving down 6th Street. And next thing I know, I was actually on TU's campus, driving up through the and I looked and saw the education building. And I said, well, heck, since I'm here, why not just go up and ask if they've got it? That's what that's. I got out of the car, parked my car, got out, walked to the education building, asked to talk to the dean of students or vice president or whoever. He just happened to be in. I went in and told him who I was, and I said, just checking to see if you might have a position available now in the future. He said, no, he was very polite. No, I don't have anything now, but let me take you. He talked to me about 30 minutes. We talked about different, and I told him where I was working, and he talked, and he said, if I hear anything, I'll be certain to call you. I just fell into the brush off, took the brush off, and I drove on back to Muskogee. That about the middle of that week, I got a letter from him saying they had a position for a counselor at the University of Tulsa if I was interested in applying. I looked at the qualifications and stuff, and they had that designed just for me, Schuyler. All of the background, everything was that position I knew was mine. That I had impressed that guy so much that he created a position for me as a counselor for TU, because they were having some of the similar problems that Northeastern were having with their students as well, because they didn't have their students were beginning to demonstrate as well. They didn't have as many, but they were vocal. So I came up for the interview, knew I had the job, and resigned and within 2 weeks I was back at TU. I was at TU. I was there for 20 years as a counselor for 20 years at TU. And that's when I took the early retirement from TU in 1997. I retired from TU.
Wow, you have had quite a legacy.
you know, Schuyler, I tell you, I did everything backwards. I went through I started as a counselor at a college and then worked my way down. Now I'm with preschoolers now. I'm a preschool counselor now from the school system. So I just did everything backwards. I've gone all the way from colleges all the way down to preschool. Yeah. I've retired 3 or 4 times, Schuyler. I don't know how many times I've retired, but they always pull me back in. I work part-time just to have something to do. But here lately, I've had so much fun with the little kids when I finally got down to them. I didn't know whether I'd want to do that or not. I did it part-time for years, and they just kept adding. And it's so much fun that I'm going to do it as long as my health will hold up. I'm going to do it. I enjoy what I do, and it keeps me. I'm still active. I still play tennis. I still play golf. I have a good life. I enjoy my life. At this point. I really do. I'm very blessed and thankful. I'm very active in my church as well. My church is very, very important to me.
What else are you into these days?
I picked up a hobby in the 80s of writing songs, and I was a closet songwriter for years. And when I started working with kids, I started writing kids songs, and now I do that, and I really, really enjoy that part of it. I write songs for my kids about manners and behavior and stuff like that, and I sing them to them, play them to them, and talk to them, and incorporate that into my presentation to the little kids, and have a lot of fun with them. They're just built-in guinea pigs, they like anything. I have a lot of fun. I love my job.